Hello and welcome to the Gain Line, Wales Online's live rugby debate show. My name's Matt Southcombe. I'm delighted to be joined once again by our rugby writer, Ben James, as we discuss all things Lions and touch on a little bit of Wales as well. We'll be discussing the Lions team to face the Sharks, which has been named this morning for their game on Wednesday. We'll also be looking back a little bit at the weekend's action when, of course, the Lions beat the Lions in Johannesburg, and Wales beat Canada pretty comprehensively at the Principality Stadium, but we'll be touching on that a little bit later in the show. This show will also be available as a podcast as well. Go over and search for the Welsh Rugby Podcast wherever you get those. So if you have to dip away from your computer or your device in the next half hour or so, don't worry, you can still catch us a little bit later on. Okay then, Ben, let's just jump into it. Plenty of changes as we expect. Obviously the games are coming thick and fast on the tour, but the headline, I guess, from a Welsh point of view, Josh Navidi and Adam Beard are going to make their debuts for the Sharks. Been in camp just over a week. What do you make of that?
I mean, it was always, at this point, a process of elimination, wasn't it? It was very much a case of who hadn't started was going to get the nod. We knew that Navidi was going to get it because Gatland alluded to it on the weekend. He basically named his back row. And it's a very exciting back row. You know, you look at that, Josh Navidi, Tom Curry, Sam Simmons. I mean, that's pretty much a fantasy rugby back row for the last 2 years, isn't it? I think everyone's excited to see how that goes. It's dynamic, pacey, just sort of brings a bit of everything. And I think that's the sort of back row, maybe not those certain players, but that sort of dynamic that they're going to bring. That's what Gatland wants on this tour. So be really interesting to see that. And Adam Beard, I mean, he's been brought onto the Lions tour, primarily for his form, and his line-out defence is going to be crucial. I don't know how much of his line-out defence we're going to see on Wednesday, because I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be another sort of mismatch against the Sharks. But hopefully they'll get taken to dark places, as Stuart Hogg sort of alluded to on the weekend, and Adam Beard will then get a chance to shine maybe defensively a little bit. But we'll have to wait and see on that front. But it's just great to see the pair of them, starting for the Lions. Navidi in particular, very unlucky to have missed out on selection in the first place. Obviously Adam Beard was a bit more under the radar, but equally deserving of his place. And to sort of see them now starting is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, this, as we said, they obviously joined the tour late and only been in camp since, I think it was last Sunday, when they hastily had to shoot up to Edinburgh and then head to South Africa with the side. Obviously, haven't had many training sessions under their belts in the grander scheme of things. Are they genuinely playing for spots in the Test series, or do you think perhaps they are probably just going to be used more of midweek fodder, or are they actually playing for a spot in the big show?
Well, I mean, there's not a great deal of midweek games to be used as fodder, to be honest. I think it's this week, and then next week is South Africa A, and then the midweek games are done. Obviously, they're not the only players to have sort of joined up late, because the weekend of the Edinburgh game, when they joined up on the Sunday night, you had sort of extra chief players joining up. So a lot of players have missed those first 2 weeks in Jersey. So, they're not the only ones playing catch up. I think Navidi in particular could really be one for a test spot. I think you've done a piece on it. I've made my feelings clear on it sort of since the Six Nations, really, that I think he's got that test match ability for the Lions. My only concern with him really is I'm not sure I see where he might fit into where Gatland's going with the back row at the minute. I think his six is going to be a hybrid six, sort of a second row back row. We've seen Laws, we've seen Tyke Byrne play there. I think that's what he wants from his six. Open side then is probably going to be a more traditional open side. We saw Hamish Watson play really well on the weekend. I think Tom Curry will do the same on Wednesday. Navidi's not really a traditional seven. He's sort of, I don't want to call him a 6.5 because that's a sort of less than endearing term that was sort of used for Chris Robshaw back when England didn't have any open side flankers. But he is sort of that. He plays really well on the blind side and sort of mixing it between those facets of the game that open sides and blind sides do so well. And, he does it excellently. And I think if he does he'll get his chances on this tour, and I think he'll take them, and he'll push himself into a test spot. Whether it works exactly for what Gatland wants, I'm not totally sure. But I don't see either of these two the fact that they joined up late hindering their test chances as much as sort of just selection in itself hinders it, what Gatland really wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose you look at that back row on Wednesday night, and we've seen a comment coming in here from Heather Greenway. Navidi should have been on the tour in the first place. Obviously, agreeing with you there, Ben. Of course, send your comments in. We'll get around as many as we can throughout the course of the show. Send any questions that you do have as well. But back to the Lions, Ben. You look at that back row for Wednesday, and you think, "Wow, so I wouldn't mind having that back row in come the first test." But then suddenly you're reminded then of how well the likes of Hamish Watson, Tyg Byrne, obviously in the Japan game, Courtney Laws. Suddenly you just think, actually, yeah, all those other players have done pretty well too, given their opportunities. Just goes to show the sort of depth of talent at Warren Gatland's disposal in that back row. Yeah,
absolutely. You didn't mention Tulupe Falatau there. He was fairly quiet on the weekend. I still thought he showed a lot of nice footwork in the tight. I think most times he carries, he does tend to sort of beat the first man in the tight, which is a massive skill set that probably gets overlooked a little bit. But yeah, the back row competition is something else. I see Andy Powell tweeted just before we came on that this back row is the test back row. You could easily agree with him, but then you as you mentioned, Hamish Watson, he's sort of being criticised from pillar to post in certain quarters for his size or lack of it heading to South Africa. But, I mean, probably along with Josh Navidi, I don't think there's a player in Test rugby who carries for his weight so well. He sort of barrels over people, it's ridiculous just the amount of sort of contact he gets through and the meters he makes after contact. He looks, I don't think there's anyone who's nailed on for a test spot, but he's making it very hard to ignore at the minute. It's just going to be interesting to see how this back row battle sort of plays out over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think you look at that back row there and you just think there's no one there is going to let you down. And you just don't really. It's hard to tell where these selection decisions are going to be decided, isn't it?
Absolutely. It seems obvious saying it, given it's a British and Irish Lions squad, but it's such a good squad. There is, I don't know, maybe it's the case. It's always that, but I feel like on this tour, you literally cannot take any position for granted in the test team at the minute. Warren Gatland says he's not even thinking about test selections at the minute. And while normally you'd sort of, as a journalist, you'd sort of think, well, that's just the sort of diplomatic answer. You probably are thinking of it. You can sort of believe it now because everywhere in that squad, it's all up for grabs and nowhere sort of typifies that better than the back row. I mean, I think on Wednesday, it's going to be fascinating to see how the dynamic works. I think Sam Simmons is just going to have a whale of a time in the wide channels. On Saturday, he came on. He probably tried a little bit too hard to sort of impress himself on the game in the limited time he had. I think Wednesday, he'll hopefully be a bit more relaxed. And as my phone drops on the floor, he'll be a little bit more relaxed in the number 8 jersey, and he'll play in those wide channels that we've seen sort of Tyg Byrne and Tipperick play in the opening games. And then, Navidi's just going to hit rucks like there's no tomorrow because that's what he does so well. And Tom Curry's going to be an interesting one. He's obviously been built up a lot as a test starter in the English media, but he started this tour on the back foot. He's had a pectoral injury, which has kept him out of the first 2 games and a fair bit of training, I think, in terms of jersey, which he arrived too late, I think a week late anyway. So he's possibly got a bit of catch-up to play. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes.
Absolutely. Just moving a little bit further into the back line then. We've obviously got an all-Welsh half-back pairing of Dan Biggar and Gareth Davis. Now, it's an interesting one here. What are these guys playing for? It kind of feels like they're playing for different things at the moment because, Biggar is kind of almost, very much the front runner to start the test series. But after Conor Murray was named as tour captain, it's kind of put Gareth Davis on a little bit of a back foot. What do you think these two are playing for on Wednesday night?
As you say, I think Dan Biggar is going to be, I think he'll be the test number 10. I thought Finn Russell played pretty well on Saturday, showed a lot of lovely touches. His kicking game is is quite frankly ridiculous at times in terms of the precision he can put on those, weighted kicks out wide. But I just think Dan Biggar's going to be the man trusted with a 10 jersey. We haven't seen Owen Farrell play much at 10 in terms of starting minutes. We'll probably see that next Saturday. As for Gareth Davis, obviously Conor Murray is the tour captain, and what we infer from that is that he will start the tests. That's potentially why Mara Itoje or Owen Farrell didn't get the tour captaincy when Alwyn Jones was ruled out. I'm not sure it's that simple. I think Conor Murray's trying to sort of show the facets of his game that has brought him selection on the last two tours. He's trying to snipe a bit more. The box kicking is going to be there as you'd expect from him, but I don't think he's sort of got his place nailed down yet. The comms on Saturday sort of talked about Gareth Davis, trying to nail down his place on the bench. I don't think Ali Price or Gareth Davis will be thinking they want a spot on the bench. They'll be looking at test starts, and I still think that scrum half is very open. Even if Conor Murray's the tour captain, I think it's all to play for there.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't really touched on the captaincy for Saturday. Wednesday, getting confused. But obviously the Lions have now named their third captain in three different games. It's going to be Ian Henderson this time around. When you look at that starting side, are you a little surprised at that call?
I don't think I am, no. Ian Henderson, plenty of experience for Ireland. Probably Ireland's form, second row in the Six Nations, which, says a lot because he was partnering Tyke Byrne for much of it. And he was one hell of a tourist in 2017. If you look at that 2017 tour and you look at all the players in that squad, the one who was unluckiest to miss out on a test spot, across the whole New Zealand tour would have been Ian Henderson. I can't remember, was it the midweek game against the Hurricanes in between the first and second tests?
Yeah, it was the Hurricanes, yeah.
Yeah, my memory slightly eludes me because I think I was in a Christchurch bar somewhere, so the teams are a bit fuzzy. But he played outstanding that night. Absolutely outstanding. I think he had a yellow card in the second half, which sort of marked his card a little bit, but he was outstanding and desperately unlucky for a test spot. So he's been there, he's done that. He knows what it means to be on a Lions tour. And I think, if you look at that team, I think he's the sensible option for a captaincy. I suppose the only other one you sort of suggest from that 15 would have been Dan Biggar, but then, Gats doesn't tend to go for backs as his captain. I know that's a bit of a contradiction considering he's named two backs as captains in the last week. But yeah, I think Ian Henderson's the sensible option.
Yeah, I think if you look through this side, there's not actually that many candidates as you touched on, and Dan Biggar as captain, is probably best not to put that on him and let him concentrate on his job. He doesn't need any encouragement to go up to referees, I don't think. So probably best to leave him concentrate on his duties as fly half. Moving into,
I suppose the thing with the Lions is you do tend to see captains of midweek games and Saturday warm-up games that you would never tend to see, sort of, because they're not in the pecking order international-wise. 2013, I think Lydia captained a game. It's just that sort of thing. You're going to get sort of left field captaincy choices just because we're not privy to what we see in the leadership groups and who's sort of making their mark in training away from their international teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move a little bit further into the back line. And the centres are interesting. Obviously got Bundy Aki coming back in and obviously played very well against Japan and suddenly thrown himself right into the mix to perhaps be a test starter when maybe wouldn't have been as such before the tour. Partner in Elliot Daly at outside centre, which again is interesting, not somewhere he's featured too heavily at international level. What are you looking forward to that? And I guess is there talk of an injury to Robbie Henshaw?
Yeah, so Robbie Henshaw's got a very, very mild hamstring strain, is what it's been described as. So they're not looking to rush him back. Gatlin speaks glowingly about Robbie Henshaw, says he's one of the outstanding centres in world rugby, so that they don't want to rush him back too soon. So potentially he could miss Saturday's game as well. That's the sort of what it sounds like from Gatland. But I think he should be all right for the latter stages of the tour, the Test series at least. But this midfield selection is interesting. Obviously you look at the 10, 12, 13. It's Bigger, Aki, Daly. I think Charlie Morgan from the Telegraph pointed out on Twitter across the first two games already, they've ran with 5 different combinations across 10, 12, 13. This will be the 6th. So, Gatland's doing a very good job of basically making the South Africans guess what's coming in that midfield. South Africa have been very, very good at defending the 13 channel in the past couple of years. So I think Gatland's keeping his options open as to how he's going to attack and what he's going to do, whether it's 10-12 axis or going for a bigger sort of midfield or having Elliot Daly at 13, which, as you mentioned, it's a long, long time since he's played there in international tests. I think 2016 against South Africa was the last time he wore 13 for England, but he looked really classy when he came on. I think it's his best position. Eddie Jones clearly disagrees, but I think as we're seeing from this Lions tour, I don't think Warren Gatland minds too much about what Eddie Jones thinks, given Sam Simmons starting at 8. But yeah, he looked really lively when he came on at 13 on the weekend. He's looked really good, albeit in the championship for Saracens in that position at the tail end of the season. I think it just allows him to sort of get in the game and, make breaks, use his handling skills through the contact. We saw that for Gareth Davis's try, and it'll be interesting to see how that midfield goes, because you can say it about every midfield that's been named, but it looks really promising.
Yeah. Got a comment coming in from Periscope here. Daly was great at 13 on Saturday. I suppose for everything that you've just touched on, Ben, a lot of which I would agree with, the only question marks will be raised over his physicality against the Springboks. Can he live with that coming down his channel? I
mean, yeah, that's a very good point. Which, again, that could sort of move the Lions away from a 10-12 axis as well. If they're going to sort of play a playmaker at 12, that could put them off that as well. You'd back Henshaw to live with physicality at 13. Daly maybe less so, although he's been playing 15 for England for the best part of 3-4 years now, so he's had to deal with a fair bit of rearguard action there. Obviously, it's different defending the 13 channel, but I don't think he's a particular weakness. It could depend on the wing choices. We've seen that Duhan van der Merwe tends to leave a little bit too much space on his edge. We saw that against Japan. If you've got someone like Daly defending 13 channel, does that sort of highlight that sort of weakness? If it's Chris Harris, who's a very good defender of the 13 channel, maybe you get away with that a bit more, and you can afford to play around someone like Duhan van der Merwe's defensive weaknesses. But again, this is all stuff that we're going to explore in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and just looking at fullback, then obviously Liam Williams is starting on Wednesday night. Stuart Hogg did very well, captain the side on Saturday. Obviously, everyone's talking about the way he tracked back to prevent that try. I guess as Hogg sort of pushed forward now as the front runner for that fullback jersey, and how far away is Liam Williams from staking a claim to it?
I think it's fairly even at the minute. I think maybe Hogg's just a slight favourite given what he was sort of his Six Nations form and the fact he was captain on Saturday and just how he's seen as sort of perceived outside of Wales and across the UK. But I think this is going to be a fascinating battle. I don't think Anthony Watson's going to get too much minutes at 15. So it's going to be a sort of just a ding-dong battle between Liam Williams and Stuart Hogg. Probably the pair of them just sort of trying to one-up each other game after game. And, it's only going to be good for the Lions. I thought Liam was really good against Japan. Did everything sort of really well. And I still think he'll nab himself a test spot one way or another. Gatland knows him. Gatland trusts him. Did it 4 years ago. And yeah, I just got a feeling he's going to nab a test spot, whether that's fullback or whether that's on the wing, whether he gets a chance on the wing in these warm-ups. We'll just have to wait and see.
Is there a danger though with with how close that call is becoming, that Liam Williams perhaps can't resist the temptation to overplay a little bit and try a little bit too much? Is that the sort of thing to be wary of if you're Liam Williams?
Yeah, possibly. I think in the past, maybe you could accuse Liam Williams of that. I think we've probably seen over the last 4 years, maybe I think he's matured into a really good test fullback, and I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue that he overplays. I think being a Saracen's probably helped him in terms of that, in terms of just understanding sort of what you need to do for the team, and now he's just a really smart player. I don't think he dies on the ball as much as he did. He picks really good lines. He generates lines from standing starts, probably better than any player in Test rugby at the minute. The way he can just sort of change his angle at the last minute, take himself away from the tackler, and open up space for someone outside him. That's a skill that that the Lions will probably sort of to look to use at some point during this tour. And I don't think he'll overplay.
All right, then let's look at the tour in a wider sense at the moment. Then, after the game on Saturday, where do you think they are in their journey, if you like, on this tour? What really impressed you about what they did on Saturday against the Sigma Lions?
It's hard to know how much to read into the game against the Sigma Lions, because they weren't the strongest of challenges. I thought the start they made a really good start, which surprised me. I thought it might have taken them, Jason Leonard spoke about it before kickoff. It might take them 10, 15 minutes to sort of get used to sort of altitude, but they started, out the blocks fantastically. The try for Lewis Rees-Zammit was exactly what you wanted to see from this Lions team. Fly half, playing flat, picking the wide option of a pod of three, and then that forward getting his hands free to give it out to a sort of second playmaker out the back, and then you create a 2-on-2. Chris Harris having the smarts to not die with the ball, to put a kick behind, and then Rees-Zammit's a freak, and he turns 50-50 chances into certainties with kicks like that. But all of that was basically from the building blocks that we saw against Japan in terms of how they're going to attack with their 1-3-3-1 sort of pod formation. So that was pleasing to see. I just think the intensity they brought to the most of the match was pleasing. Hamish Watson, I've mentioned it before, the way he carries, but he was outstanding. Courtney Laws carried really well. Mara Toje didn't lead the tackle list, but I think no one made more dominant tackles than him. He's just an absolute nuisance, especially around the line out in terms of his more work, in terms of getting up there. As just so hard to stop. Scrum halves, opposition scrum halves, he just harries them and frustrates them. And if you think in a couple of weeks we're going to be going up against Faf de Klerk, the one thing you want to do is harry him and frustrate him. But yeah, I think Gatland will be pleased with most things. I thought they defended well in that period of pressure where the Lions had a lot of one-up phases. Scramble defense probably left a little bit to be desired on the first try, and that was an issue. And I don't think the line-out maul we got to see enough of. They'll be disappointed where they set one up very late on and didn't take advantage of it. But I think that's something that we'll see sort of as the tour progresses. But it'll be a weapon they'll want to develop against South Africa.
Where do you think Warren Gatland will be in terms of his happiness with how things have gone so far? If you were going to rate it out of 10, how satisfied do you think he'll be with the way things are progressing at the moment?
I think he'll be pretty happy. At the end of the day, you can only sort of beat the opposition that's in front of you. Japan provided us with a bit of a test, not too much, but they were good in parts, especially the way they finished the game. But the Lions were convincing winners there. Obviously, the Sigma Lions, less so a challenge, but the Lions did what they had to, and racked up the points. I don't see the Sharks offering much of a challenge. I don't see any of the sort of the warm-up games really offering a challenge, and that's something that Warren Gatland's spoken about. He was on the tour as an assistant to Surya McGeechan in 2009. they felt then that they went into the Test series against South Africa sort of undercooked because of the warm-up games. So I think Gatland this time is very aware that whatever happens in the warm-ups, they need to do a lot of work and training and away from those games to make sure that doesn't happen again.
All right, and just on a similar theme then, before we move on to just briefly discussing Wales's win over Canada, what are we expecting from the Lions on Wednesday night then? Because, I mean, I might be harsh to say that this is probably don't want to use the word weaker because it's not a weak side, but it's got a, if you look at the three teams that the Lions have named so far, it's probably not as strong as the other two.
Possibly not, but then I think the Sharks I think the Sigma Lions were the weakest team the Lions will play on this tour, but I think the Sharks are going to struggle as well. Their coach has sort of come out this morning after naming the team and spoken about the fact that many of their players lack international experience. And when he says international experience, he's not just talking about tests, he's talking about Super Rugby. I think they played a couple of Currie Cup games. So it's going to be a big challenge for them. In terms of sort of players you'd recognise, Kerwin Bosch is the one that stands out. He's got 2 caps for South Africa, but the last of those, I'm sure you'll remember, Matt, was in Washington against Wales back in 2018.
Yeah, feels like a lifetime ago.
It does. So it's going to be a challenge for the Sharks. You can only sort of see another relatively convincing win for the Lions.
Yeah, it's important though that I think that Dan Biggar shows up well. He'll do his test credentials absolutely the world of good if because the pressure's on now this side, isn't it? They've had 2 convincing wins. You don't want to be that side that lets the good feeling slip on tour almost. Yeah,
I think that's almost rather than the opposition. That's probably the thing that helps drive a Lions tour on is sort of backing up the last performance. Gatland's spoken about it a lot. The responsibility the players have to follow up what the last team have just done. So I think that's as big a driving force on this tour as any. Just keeping momentum going and sort of not being the one to let down the jersey.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to throw to you now, Ben, because while you were covering the Lions on Saturday, I was covering Wales against Canada, and we're going to discuss that, and you're going to become the host for the next sort of last five minutes of the show.
Gladly. I mean, yeah, and you had the privilege of being in the stadium, whereas I'm clearly not in Johannesburg. I'm actually self-isolating thanks to the Track and Trace app, but that's neither here nor there. But you were in the stadium for a very one-sided test match. Obviously, there's only one place to start. It was Lee Halfpenny's 100th cap. What was built to be a fantastic occasion for him, but it ended all too quickly and all too desperately sad, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was very difficult to watch, I'll be honest. I've interviewed Halfpenny a number of times in the last few years, and unfortunately, we always seem to talk about injuries. He had a really bad concussion in 2018, I think, against Australia that kept him out for 3 months. He had to battle back hard from that. But he spoke before his 100th test. We spoke to him on Thursday, and he spoke about how the last time he did his ACL before the 2015 Rugby World Cup being the most difficult time of his career. And we don't know what he's done at this stage. He'll be having scans probably today, I would have thought. But it very much looked like an ACL, or at the very least knee ligaments. You hope it's not that bad. But yeah, it was just desperately sad. He was clearly in a lot of pain. 30 seconds into the match, like you said, his 100th test, took a clearance kick, tried to run it back, stepped off his left leg, and was just in agony straight away. Desperately sad for him. Wayne Pivac said after the game that he's spoken to him and he's determined to come back. He's 32 years of age, but he's got his 100th test match, but I think he's 3 or 4 short of 100 test matches for Wales. So he's desperate to get that 100th Welsh cap. So you hope that it's not as bad as it looks, and you just wish him all the best in his recovery and hope that he can come back and get that 100th Welsh cap.
Yeah, absolutely. It just because it just sort of sapped all the good feelings of being back in the stadium with fans and all that just out of the occasion. Didn't it to happen so early and sort of the 6-7 minute delay. But I mean, credit to the Welsh players. They obviously conceded early after that, but they put all that behind them and put in a convincing performance, albeit against a very limited Canada team. Who are the new faces that stood out for you? Because obviously there was a fair few new caps.
Yeah, it was. It became a bit of a training session in the end. But I mean, the two new caps to start, Ben Carter and Tom Rogers, both did fantastically well. I thought. Ben Carter, young lad, first cap, and I think it was the first time he's played a professional game in front of his parents, which is an interesting one for him. But yeah, he was given the added responsibility of calling the lineouts. Wayne Pivac spoke in the week that he spoke after the game that they wanted to put a bit of pressure on him, see how he responded to that and all that added responsibility. And he did extremely well. Got man of the match. I think Wales won something like 12 out of 14 lineouts. So, those figures are comparable with, Wales when they're at full strength. So I think he's done very well there. I think Wayne Pivac will be thrilled with how his debut went. And he'll just hope to see him continue. Now, if I was Pivac, I'd be giving him a run of games for the rest of the summer, just to keep him involved and get him up to speed, because I think he could quite quickly become a very, very good player for Wales, at the top level. So I'll be giving him all the exposure possible. Tom Rogers was good, enthusiastic, buzzing around the place. He was coming off his wing a lot, looking for the ball. Clearly sensed that there were opportunities to score tries out there, and he was going looking for them. A little bit suspect, perhaps sometimes defensively and maybe positionally. Got a little bit too casual going back after Canada kicked the ball in behind, and the Canadian winger almost made him look a little bit silly and almost scored, but got away with that one. Pivac called it a mixed bag for Rogers, but I think it was his debut's go. It was a good one. And then coming off the bench, obviously Tane Basham getting 2 tries. He was buzzing around everywhere. Very good player, as we all know, and would have probably had a debut a little bit sooner had injuries not got in the way. Ben Thomas was good when he came on at fly half. Obviously, he's seen as a bit of a playmaker who can cover across the midfield, the centre and fly half. Thought he did particularly well, kicked his goals well and took it to the line, challenged Canada. Again, we got to take into consideration the opposition here, but all told, I thought it was a very good afternoon for Wales in general, just unfortunately overshadowed by that injury to Lee Halfpenny.
Absolutely. What about sort of maybe some of the more established players who might have stolen a march on those away with the Lions? Was there anyone who did their credentials sort of no harm when the autumn comes knocking?
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't wish it on anyone, but if a scrum half gets injured on the tour, then Thomas Williams will be on the next flight out. I don't think there's any question about that. He was fantastic on Saturday. He was everything that we know he is, and he was at his best. We've spoken about it before, the fact that he loved his basketball growing up, and just with the ball in hand, he handles the ball like a Fijian sometimes, like we see with Nakarawa, for example, just on one hand waving it around in the contact area. But he's obviously 5'0" and the smallest guy on the field, but he's like waving the ball in contact and throwing offloads, and it's just unbelievable. Again, it was Canada and there were opportunities out there, but he played very well. I'd be surprised if unfortunately one of the scrum halves does go down, if he's not the man that gets the call up. But I sensed in the Six Nations, and I know we only saw him for a limited time because he unfortunately picked up his injury, but I feel like it's his number 9 jersey to lose with Wales. And I know that sounds strange because Gareth Davis is away, but I really feel like Thomas Williams is moving ahead of him slightly in the pecking order, and that's going to be interesting when the autumn comes round to see which way Pivac goes. But he definitely stood out in the absence of the Lions players, and perhaps while all eyes were on the Lions, he was one that stood out. And obviously captain Jonathan Davis as well. Whilst it wasn't a blockbusting performance from him, he did everything well. Played a hand in a few of the tries. Just a calm, focused head, because they were surrounded by. He was surrounded by relatively young players, inexperienced and unfamiliar players. He was really the glue that held it all together. Obviously, captain on the day and had to read the riot act to the players when discipline sort of fell off a cliff at the end of the match. But, when you lost Adam Beard and Josh Navidi to the Lions, and then obviously losing Lee Halfpenny so early on in the match as well, suddenly there's not a lot of experience out there with Davis, and I thought he did fantastically. And again, whilst it perhaps wasn't a blockbusting performance, it just shows Warren Gatland that he's ticking over. And again, you don't wish the injuries on anyone, but if something were to happen, I think Jonathan Davis is just ticking along nicely and showing that he would be ready to step up if required.
Of course, and moving on from Canada, it's 2 tests now against Argentina, isn't it? How do we see those going? What sort of challenge do we expect from Argentina? And who are the sort of players you expect to get minutes now from a Welsh perspective?
Yeah, well, they're going to be tougher challenges than Canada. Obviously, you go from a tier 2 to a tier 1 nation, then the questions you're asked become a lot harder. That being said, a pretty strong Argentina side, not far off full strength. It only beat Romania something like 24-17 on the weekend, which was a surprise. You would have expected a side like Argentina, who have done tremendous things in the Rugby Championship in the last 12 months, to go over there and really rack up a score. So they come to Cardiff as a much sterner test than Canada, but I was expecting Wales to be really up against it this summer with Argentina, but that Romania score has kind of just thrown me a little bit. When Wales went out there in 2018, they took a relatively second string side out there and won both games comfortably. I think what happened on those occasions was Wales got in front in the first 15 minutes. There were a few like Reece Patchell penalties and then 1 or 2 tries, and the game was over within 20 minutes. I think if Wales can manage a similar feat this time around, then we could see similar scores. But Argentina are coming over full strength, and Wales are playing their second team largely. So it's going to be an interesting one. Wayne Pivac has spoken about trying to look at a number of players in a number of different positions and getting 5 deep in every position, looking forward to the World Cup. So he's obviously willing to sacrifice results and performances for the sake of giving out new caps and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see which way he goes. But I think, again, now you've lost Halfpenny, as I touched on, there's not a lot of experience in the side now when you compare it to what it would look like under normal circumstances. So, it's going to be interesting to see whether he is willing to go fully experimental against Argentina, or whether he does go a little bit more cautious and tries to get the win.
Absolutely. It promises to be another cracking week of rugby, doesn't it? I guess all that's left to decide now is who signs off the Facebook Live and the podcast.
I'll let you do this one, Ben, because I know in the coming weeks and months I'm going to be hosting these, trying to host this circus while you're in South Africa. So I'll let you do one last sign off before you jump on your flight in the next week or so.
Fingers crossed I fly out next week. But of course, if you are listening to this on podcast form, do make sure you give us a review. It really does help us out. If you're watching on Facebook, obviously join us again next week when we do another Facebook Live. And for all the latest Welsh rugby news and Lions update, you can catch it all on Wales Online.